So, good evening, everybody. We continue in the 44th chapter. We begin a brand new chapter today. I will just note that it was noticed that the end of the last class, due to its length, it was cut off that last piece. So we're just going to repeat this, which today we concludes the chapter based on the overall message. As you can see on page 124, there's a dot after Durdayo. It says, the orderly service, which is established and dependent on choice of man, not through a particular hisedus arousal from above. If you recall, the Alter Rebbe brings the story of Rabbi Eliezer ben Durdayo. As you can see in the previous class, the whole episode with Rabbi Eliezer ben Durdayo, but it was something totally irregular. It came from a hisedus arousal from above. But what is orderly, one has to preface with, he has to precede, l'hagdim tchila, kima teira mitzvahs alidei d'ira tata, fulfilling Hashem's teira mitzvahs through the lower level of yira, which is katnos akoponim, at least the katnos. If you recall, there was the katnos and the gadlus mentioned in the previous chapter, in the beginning of this chapter, which we won't go into. Everything which we're speaking about now and everything which is mentioned subsequently, it's all naturally a continuation. Especially we conclude a chapter, need not to mention all this, even in brief. What we learned in the previous classes in this very chapter, as again we mentioned it all along, particularly for the newcomers, that there is, you can see this very class and the classes of the previous chapters and from the very beginning of the Tanya on the TanyaOnline.com. Easy to follow, separate scroll bar for the text and a separate scroll bar with all the previous classes accordingly. So you can always tap in and easily find this which you're looking for, again, in the subject which is discussed, and again, particularly the previous classes on this very chapter, and to appreciate the conclusion of the Alter Rebbe. He said there's the norm, there's default, there is the Seder Havodah HaKvua, which is established and dependent on choice of man. In other words, nothing irregular occurring. Then the person has to preface the fulfilling Hashem's Torah mitzvahs through the inferior, lower level of Yira. At least Katnos. Remember, even in the Yira Tata, there was Katnos and Gadlus, smallness, greatness, in the inferior Yira itself, as we've seen towards the beginning of the chapter. At least to stay away from evil and do good, to illuminate his godly soul with a light of Torah and its mitzvahs, and subsequently, or consequent to his illuminating, bringing about the great light of Torah mitzvahs in his soul, which shines and illuminates his whole nefesh shalikis to be transparent in its alignment with Hashem. Then, consequent to that, the light of Ava, which is unique, special, again, as we understand from the message of this chapter, will shine. This light of Ava, of love, will shine upon him. The Rebbe concludes, interestingly, the word Ve'ahavta has the numerical value of twice lichtikai. Apparently, Ve'ahavta is one type of light, the light of love, the light, the appreciation of the connection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu via love. So it's one light, one experience, one lichtige, lightful, bright, experience. So why would the Ahavta, the numerical value of Ahavta, be twice light? In other words, twice 206, which is again 412. Answer, because the Ava, the light of Ava, comes consequent to one's shining, illuminating his godly soul with the light of Torah mitzvahs. So once you have the Ava there, so you already have two lights. So this is again alluding and intimating this message. Ava comes subsequent, consequent to the lichtigkeit, the light of Torah mitzvahs, which is based on the Yira Tata, the lower inferior level of Yira, and then the Ava would come. So Ava already is saying that this is already the second level comes again, the Hemshech, in consequent to the light of Torah mitzvahs, which is based on the Yirat Hatah and the inferior, at least the inferior level of fear, Katnos, Gadlus, rather, the grandness in that Yirat Hatah, or even Katnos accordingly. This is the conclusion of the previous chapter, and with this we will begin Perek Mem Daled, the 44th chapter. So Perek Mem Daled. V'hinei kol madregas ava mebeids madregas elu, all these different levels of love, which stems from these two levels of ava rabba v'avas elam. These two levels mentioned in the previous chapter, in this chapter Perek Mem Gimel, as the Alter Rebbe says, there's an ava rabba, come directly from Atzilus, from a place, a domain which is pure. There's no hell and vehesta, there's no concealment on this light and energy because it's coming from Atzilus, which Atzilus lo yigur chora, there's no evil, even subtle evil. As Chassidus explains, subtle evil will be even subtle yeshes, subtle mitzias, subtle of something saying even in the most nuanced, subtle manner, the I am, which really that phenomenon begins of Bria, even Elam HaBria. Remember, Elam HaBria is a very godly, holy world. It's the domain of Gan Eden Ha'elyon, the supreme Gan Eden. Elam HaYetzira is Gan Eden HaTachton, but it's Gan Eden. But nonetheless, that's where the beginning, the Aschalos HaYesh, like it says in Kabbalah, and Chassidus explains, even the subtle Mitzius begins in Bria, and therefore there is this quantum leap step between Atzilus and Bria, because even as much as Bria is a holy world, and a very holy world, it's a divine world, Gan Eden Ha'elyon, which is the highest, greatest Giluyim, revelations are manifest in Bria, but nonetheless it's Bria. Bria, it's kind of a Mitzias, even again subtly, in Atzilus this doesn't exist at all. It's a world which hosts and houses the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore the terminology of the saying of Atzilus is lo yigur chara. There's not even the most subtle level of Ra, again not chas v'shalom evil in the full sense of the measure of the word, but even the most subtle type of mitzias doesn't, in other words, a yesh is something which is an existent, even a wholly existent being, an existent being in the face of Hashem doesn't exist, because truly from the perspective of Hashem, because Ein Ein Milvadi, there's nothing else other than Hashem. What carries, what brings about that message, what conveys that message of Ein Ein Milvadi is the world of Atzilus. And that's where this Ava Rabba comes from. Again, you can see it in detail in elaboration of the previous chapter when we spoke about this Ava Rabba, very unique love, which not everybody is privileged to it. It's someone who's Shalom B'Yiro, as you recall, those who are complete in the Yiras Hashem. And then Hashem bestows this Ava Rabba, coming straight from Atzilus, pure, untainted, unadulterated Ava, which naturally reflects in the heart of the Yid with a great passion and a unique passion and a unique type of love and drive to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then there's Abbas Eilam, which man is able to, based on his meditation and pondering, gain and create and initiate, establish in his own heart this Ava, but it comes from Eilam Lashon Hela Hester. We spoke about this many times as well, that this is the Ava which comes from via Eilam. This in itself, there was two levels, the Ava associated, or coming from his Beinanus, the pondering, the meditating on Malakol Almin, and then you have the Ava Eilam, which is based on the meditation on Seviv Kol Almin. Again, you can see this all in the previous chapters, in this Mem Gimel. So nechlekes lekama b'chinas madreges le'ein kates. This is divided into so many levels, and Alter Rebbe says le'ein kates. There is no limit how many the divisions, subdivisions there are to these two levels of Avas Eilam, Ava Rabba and Avas Eilam, which generally Alter Rebbe has this also when it comes to the Beinani and the Tzaddik and the Tzaddik B'Teva, Tzaddik B'Rali, as an example. Tzaddik B'Rali, rather, or Rosh B'Rali, says that, and we can appreciate, no two people are the same, no two people that serve the HaKadosh Baruch Hu the same, and therefore Where does everybody's position come in? Is just something which doesn't fit the bill, or and there's only a few bills, let's say a few avenues in Avodas Hashem, and someone who doesn't have a perfect description of this avenue, so he's not part of the movement of serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu. The answer is no. There's so many different levels. Obviously, there's overall categories. Alter Rebbe himself categorized the tzaddik very clearly, what the tzaddik v'tevli, tzaddik v'rali, and the rasha v'tevli, rasha v'rali, and so on. But we could appreciate that there's so many different levels. For example, Alter Rebbe makes it clear in tzaddik v'tevli, tzaddik v'rali, even rasha v'tevli. There's tzaddik. It starts with the tzaddik v'rali. He says there's a lofim ravavish, thousands and tens of thousands. In other words, myriads of different levels. Because in the end of the day, they all do fit that overall category of tzaddik v'rali. As an example, just as an example. So he says even this expression of Abbas Rabbah, Abbas Elam, it's not fixed into one type of expression. It carries the message. Abba Rabbah carries the message of Abba Rabbah. Abbas Elam carries the message of Abbas Elam. But there's the sub. And sub, in other words, the division of these Abba Rabbah, it manifests in so many different levels. And Alter Rebbe says in Kates, to no end, because it's all based on where the person's holding the Avodas Hashem, and no two people are on the same level. No two people are on the same level of Avodas Hashem. We need not to explain that. We can appreciate it just by taking the moment to understand where these of this connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is beyond the action or speech or thought, the sensation of heart, the sensation of mind. Are there two people who have that same sensation in every other area of life? No, they don't. We are very different. Each individual is unique and different in their very style. Again, we're talking with someone who is following the pattern of Avodas Hashem, and you find that alignment with, if it's Abba Rabbah, Abbas Elam, there is the description of Abbas Rabbah and Abbas Elam. There's no other description of Abba Rabbah, of Abbas Elam, and Alter Rebbe says it's subdivided into so many levels, but within Abba Rabbah itself, it's divided into so many different levels. Again, as Alter Rebbe will explain, because it's based on the meditation and pondering, or even Abba Rabbah, which is more how much the person is shalim b'yira, how much he's complete in his fearing and revering Hashem. There's no two people alike. Hence the Abba Rabbah, which is bestowed upon them, is also not the same between two people. And when it comes to Abbas Elam, we can appreciate it more because it's predicated on my appreciation, and my pondering, my meditation on the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No two people appreciate the dynamics of Elokus the same way. Hence the Abbas Elam, the love, the drive to it is obviously different. So therefore we can appreciate when the Alter Rebbe says not only it's divided into a few levels, but like in Kates, there's no end to say, 50 levels or 50,000 levels or 150,000 levels, a million levels, as opposed to 1,000,001 or 1,000,005. It doesn't, it's like in Kates. And again, not difficult to appreciate. It's something that we can understand based on, as the Alter Rebbe says, Kol Chad Ufum Shiri Delay, each one according to his own measurement. Which Kos Bezeir, like the Zeir says on the Pasuk, so beautifully translates the Pasuk, Neida Basha'arim Bailo. The literal translation, and this comes from Eshes Chayil, correct? Eshes Chayil, that it says Neida, that it speaks about the woman of valor, that in her gates her husband was known. She gave her husband a great name in the gates of the city. So the Zeir says, total different explanation. In other words, you don't see the connection between the simple explanation of this with the Zeir translates, but so beautifully the Zeir says, Noida Basha'orim Bailo, that it's known, Basha'orim, based on the shar, the estimation, the valuation of how much man taps in to Elokus, to pondering the Bonaniyot, the meditations on Elokus. Bailo, the husband, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, we know that Hashem is called the Ish, we are called the Isha. There is that spousal relationship, emphatically was noted emphatically by Shlomo HaMelech, by the Shir Hashirim. Mentioned and alluded to this in times before and after, but Shlomo HaMelech brought out very much this relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a spousal relationship. We know there's different types of relationship. Kibanim, kavadim, your children, servants. Hashem is a king, a master, a father, and so on. But we know that there's the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as an ish v'isha, man and his wife. Knesset Yisrael, Am Yisrael is called the wife, and Hashem is called the ish. So the ish would be the baila, the husband of Am Yisrael is Noida, which is again HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this baila, which is Hashem, the spouse. The husband is known, Noida is known Basha'arim based on each shar, each estimation. We say a shir or the shar of the shuk, of the marketplace, the valuation, the estimation of something is called as well the shar. So the Zohar says that Noida, the Baila, is Noida Hashem. Again, we spoke about this unique, you could even call it very significant. For that matter, again, not to go off over here, if you recall, we spoke about why Shir HaShirim is called Kodesh Kodoshim. Shlomo HaMelech brought about and not discovered, because it was alluded to before as well, but Shlomo HaMelech brought about something extremely revolutionary and extremely special, unique, because it takes on a different dynamic and a different type of relationship when we appreciate HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the Baal and Am Yisrael, the Isha. Hashem is the Ish, Am Yisrael, the Isha, and so on. Again, it's alluded to in Torah, Ish, the famous Gemara, that he's Ma'il B'Hashem. And in other words, it's brought before, but Shlomo HaMelech brought it to the surface. And again, it's a total different, we spoke about in the past, how much it revolutionizes our entire Avodas Hashem. And this is the reason why it's called Kodesh Kodoshim. In any case, so the Hashem is called the Baal, Hashem is called the husband. So we know Noida, Meloshin Das, the knowledge, the appreciation of Baila, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is based on Sha'arim, how much we invest, how much we ponder and meditate in the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's how much it's Noida. That's the Pirush of the Zohar. So because no two people have the same appreciation of any idea in Olam, in every area of life, as the Gemara says, Kishem she'ein partzufeim shav, just like their images are not the same. No two people look alike. So too, ein de'iseim shav, is their knowledge, their perception, their appreciation to any matter is not similar. It is not alike one to each other. So because everything is based, in other words, our heart experience is based on our meditation and our appreciation, intellectual appreciation of Elokus. Consequently, our drive to Elokus is naturally distinct and different. Because again, it's based on how much we appreciate. So no two people understand and appreciate the same idea in the same way. Therefore, consequently, it reflects in how much the Abba, the love, the drive, the passion to this, in this case of Elokus, like no two people are the same. And that's why we can appreciate Le'en Kates. There's the experience of the Avarab, again, even when you place it in the two categories of Avarab and Abasalam, or it follows one of the categories, Avarab and Abasalam, precisely, again, with precision, because there is the Avarab, that iconic Avarab doesn't change. That's one idea. Avas Elam, that icon of Avas Elam, is another idea. But from there, you have the sub. In other words, it stems and it's expressed in so many different ways and many different levels. As the Alter Rebbe says, it's based on this Zayar, as the Lashon the Zayar says, that Hashem, the Baal, makes himself known and cleaves, adheres to each one based on how much the person would estimate, meaning to say, value, ponder the context, i.e. ponder, penetrate on the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again in his heart, that recognition, that appreciation for Elokus. And based on that, that's how much Hashem connects, adheres to this individual, makes himself known, etc. And therefore, therefore, love and fear and love are called the hidden of Hashem. Remember the pasuk on Yistarish Lashem Lekeinu. It's a pasuk in Nitzavim. Parshat Nitzavim Yistarish Lashem Lekeinu. V'aniglos lanu uvaneinu. The hidden belongs to God. Remember in that context, the pasuk is saying Hashem knows. Don't worry for Hashem. He's the perfect judge. He knows everything that goes on in the heart of the human being. He makes no mistake. But v'haniglos, this which is revealed, is to us. And we have to look after each other to make sure that the revealed part, in other words, this which is meant in our service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meant to be manifest in action, speech, and thought. We know what we can do. We can pinpoint with a finger with ourselves, with our others, and so on. This is something revealed to us. But what goes on in the heart of the Yid, the heart of the human being, the mind of the human being, this is Hashem Elokeinu. This belongs. This is Nistarish. This is by definition something which is obscure. This is something which is different. By definition, this is something which is concealed in Hashem. Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem knows everything. And therefore, again, if you remember the context of the pasuk, when it again deals with the relationship of Hashem and Am Yisrael, but as the Rebbe brings it in over here, he says, Ava B'Yira, or by definition called an Istadus L'Hashem Elokeinu. We could perfectly appreciate that. It's called this which is hidden because it's something which is so nuanced and so subtle, and it's something which is not on the table. When I put on tefillin, for example, that's the same tefillin that I put on and my friend puts on. Not exactly the same pair. Yes, there's also hidurim, different pairs of tefillin which have different hidurim. That means one can express more perfection even in the mitzvahs which are black and white, structured, tefillin, mezuzahs, and so on. But nonetheless, there are similarities. This one puts in tefillin, that one puts in tefillin. It's kind of the same appearance of Moshe Rabbeinu wearing tefillin. The action itself, and the mezuzah, and the matzah that we eat. There's no difference really between the matzah a yid eats, hard to say regular yid, but let's call it even aish pashut, eats, and the greatest tzaddik. The matzah pretty much looks the same. The haniglos is lanu l'vaneinu. There's something which you could clearly define. This is what it is, pinpoint. And again, even when it comes to speech, it's the Torah that we learn. Omar Abaya, Omar Rabba, you hear the same voices, the same expressions, because this is defined. This is the Torah, which is Lashon Al Torah Torah, Achas Mishpat Echad L'Kolana. One Torah, one Mishpat. It's not that Moshe Rabbeinu, great sage, puts on different type of tefillin. Tefillin is tefillin, mezuzah, lulav and esrog is lulav and esrog, and a sukkah is a sukkah, and so on. So, as opposed to love and fear, this is a whole fear and love. This is a heart sensation, an inner sensation, and therefore it's Lashem Elokeinu. It's not something which you can pinpoint. It's not something you can say this is it, and therefore it's divided into levels. Lashon Al Torah and Kates. There's no end because it's not something which is defined and say this is it. It's much more nuanced. And therefore, it's an inner experience, and therefore it's Lashem Elokeinu. Let's follow the text. Hanistar is Lashem Elokeinu. The Torah mitzvahs, the actual performing Torah and abiding by Hashem's mitzvahs. This is niklis lanu. This is revealed to us, ulvanenu, to our children. La'asais, it's about action. Again, it's defined. As the Alter Rebbe says, one Torah, one judgment means say one manner of performing as Hashem mishpatim, Hashem's edicts, Hashem's mitzvahs is equal to all bikim kol Torah mitzvahs in fulfilling the entire Torah and its mitzvahs v'chinas ma'aseh in action. It's interesting. Alter Rebbe emphasizes the action. Doesn't say bedibur, but again we could appreciate it one way or another also. But let's keep to the Alter Rebbe's to the words of the Alter Rebbe in action. It's pretty similar. As opposed to when you're talking about fear and love, this is based on the knowledge of Hashem in the mind and heart, like we mentioned before, and therefore it divides itself into thousands and Lashon Al Torah madreges lein kates, levels to no end. However, even though again they belong to that compartmentalization, in other words, there is the Abba Rabba, Abbas Eilam. That is clear, and again, it's two different types of Abbas, very much compartmentalized, as we see in the previous chapter, which you could easily access. I mentioned also it's easy to access because you have every class comes with the text. So if you're looking for particular wording, in other words, to know a little more explanation of There's sometimes you can see it, you can appreciate from the text itself, even without listening to the class. But if you want to perhaps even listen, tune in, it's easy to follow because you grab the text and you listen. You're able to. The class is corresponding naturally to the text up on the screen, but again, you could see it, you could appreciate from the text itself, which with its English translation as well. And again, in the previous chapter, where the Alter Rebbe divides or distinguishes between the Avarab and Avasalam, but even there is the general description of these two, but there are so many different levels in each of them. However, one idea, one expression of love, which the Alter Rebbe says this is included from all the different levels, and not all the different levels from one one type of love is to the exclusion of the other, but he says from both of them, the Avarabba and Avas Eilam, the Hishava l'chol nefesh misrael, it's equal and pertinent and attainable, relevant to every soul of every Yid, which means to the soul of every Yid, meaning to every Yid, v'Yerushalayim Avisei. It's an inheritance from our forefathers. And therefore, once you say it's an inheritance, so an inheritor, here does not need to be this great chacham, this great wise person in order to inherit. For that matter, if a child is 1 day old, or a few moments old, and his father, multi-billionaire, as an example, passes away, Rachmana litzlan, God forbid, the child by definition is a billionaire. He's Ben Yochid, he's an only child, he's a billionaire. Because he doesn't have to know, and the child knows anything of the business world, doesn't know anything about himself, at least consciously. There's nothing they know. They're just an infant, just born into this world. Nonetheless, by definition, they are valued as so much and so much because, again, they are inheritors. And when we say every single, this type of love, which the Alter Rebbe is going to describe, this is an inheritance of our forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Hence, no Yid could say, well, this doesn't belong to me, this is not pertinent to me. By definition, it's not so, because it's an inheritance from Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and therefore it does relate to every single Yid, and therefore we can understand why the Alter Rebbe says it's included of Avas Rab of Avas Eilam, because you're dealing of an inheritance coming from Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, which they had every type of Ava, and they had every type of Yira and every type of Ava Rab and Avas Eilam. Additional to that, we can find in this, again, as we go along, and we can appreciate the two dimensions of Avarab and Avas Eilam in this expression of this love, which the Alter Rebbe is going to articulate at this point. But even before that, it's an all-encompassing type of love coming as an inheritance of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, which they were the initiators of this relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And initiators means, say, within all of Am Yisrael, the initiation of this connection, of this love of the Kadosh Baruch Hu began from them, and initiated from them, and they were included of every single one of these ahavas, these loves, and therefore it's an inheritance from them. So both levels of Avarab and Avas Eilam, both levels of love, are embedded by definition of what this love is all about. Again, as inheritance of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov,